Hey guys, we are back here at Red River TV. Glad you guys could come back. Today we're sitting with Senator Nathan Dahm with District 33, and that is Tulsa, the South Side.
Broken Arrow, Bixby, South Tulsa County, yes.
And we're going to be talking about some bills that he has presented this session. We were just sitting here talking before, and we were talking about how 2020 session may get a little crazy, but we will see. Hopefully not.
Remains to be seen, yes.
Right?
Definitely.
Okay, so first question that we have is, and this is, I want people to pay attention to this, especially because of the fight that we have going on in several states when it comes to education, when it comes to homeschooling, when it comes to government being involved in education. And this was interesting to me because Nathan is one of the few homeschool graduates to ever serve in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's actually really important. I think it kind of levels the playing field when it comes to being a voice, particularly in education. So my question is, I see how you worded that. Okay, sorry. I noticed you were brought up in a missionary family and you spent a lot of time in the former Soviet bloc countries. How would you say that it shaped your thinking on collectivism versus conservatism?
So having that background of homeschool was very helpful because actually I had both. So when we lived in Broken Arrow, before we moved overseas, I attended public school.
Oh, okay.
And then when we moved over to Romania as missionaries, I did homeschooling. So I've actually had the opportunity to experience both. So not just one limited perspective. So I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
But then living over in Romania, as well as living here in the States, I've been able to see those differences as well.
Yes.
So a lot of times people can just get caught in their one little bubble of however they were raised and not be able to compare and contrast those things.
Yeah.
So I lived in Romania, formerly communist country, still very socialist country. They're trying to get out of that. They're embracing capitalism. They're moving towards that, but it is a very slow process.
Yeah.
And when we first moved over there, to see the effects of communism, not just on the country, on the economy, on the spiritual environment, on all those things, but even just on the human spirit. I mean, it destroys ingenuity. It destroys creativity. It's not just that there's a lack of it. It destroys it because not only is it not incentivized like it is here under the free market, where if you have ingenuity, there can be an incentive for that because you can create profit out of that and better your life and your family's life.
Exactly.
But it was actually destroyed. It was not sought out. It was they wanted everybody to conform. So if you tried to have any ingenuity or do any of those things, it actually was punished. So it was the exact opposite of what we have here. So that's one reason why seeing how government can be so restrictive and so harmful. That's one reason why I hate communism and socialism and why I work so much to make government be about protecting individual rights. And that's my main focus.
Wow. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
That's actually really inspiring to me.
Yeah,
So sorry, I'm having a moment here. But I think that's really inspiring, particularly, to our followers, that our generation, what he just said, it's very important, you guys, to our generation, because it's our generation that is, could be the ones that possibly try to adopt, something so faulty. Do you know what I mean? As far as government, and really paying attention to the fact that, that's the possibility when you allow government to come in and get too large. And so having senators like Nathan Dahm in government is very important, especially coming from both aspects and being able to see both aspects. Next question. Now, this has to do with Bill 1384.
Oh, yes.
This is the Make America
plates,
Great
yes.
Again, Keep America Great Oklahoma license plates. Now, apparently there was, the VFW took a little bit of an issue with that. So what was going on with that?
So when I first came up with this concept, I identified two veterans groups here in Oklahoma that President Trump had donated to in the past.
Gotcha.
So that's how I identified them.
Gotcha.
Now, I do like to clarify with people that these license plates actually are not going to support President Trump's campaign.
Gotcha.
That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
This is for people that agree with America
Yes.
and putting our country first,
Yes.
keeping our country great, making our country great.
Yes.
That's what it's about. But the money that would go for this would not go to his campaign or any campaign. It would go to these two veterans groups.
That's awesome.
So that's how I did select those groups, though, because they are ones that he has supported in the past.
Gotcha.
So I felt like it's something that, that is in
sense.
line with that. That makes sense. Now, obviously, the VFW was not supportive of that. I don't know if it was because I didn't select them or what their intention was, but they sent out a press release saying that, that I hadn't sought the counsel of any other veterans groups. But the thing I found interesting is, they make this kind of this comment about me not seeking out their comment or seeking their input before it, but they didn't seek my input and they didn't contact me about the bill afterwards or whatever. They just send out this press release also.
Gotcha.
So it almost seems like they were upset that they didn't get the press coverage.
Sounds
and so
like
they
it
were
to
just
me.
trying to jump onto it. I mean, they do a great work as well. And that's not to say anything against them. I appreciate every organization that does stuff for our veterans. But the reason that I selected those two was because President Trump had been actively involved with them and supporting them directly in the past.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I hope that they accomplish whatever they wanted to accomplish with that they still get the support. I'm not trying to cut any support from them. I'm just trying to find a way to get more support to our veterans.
Gotcha. And what's interesting too is that, I mean, if it was me, I would be a little leery. You know what I mean? Just because, I mean, my gosh, anything Make America Great Again, I would be a little leery of presenting that to anybody for that matter. Do you know what I mean? So I get it. I would tread lightly there too, which probably is why you were so surprised by that response. So I totally get it. Wow.
So the next question we're going to ask, this is actually about Senate Bill 1081, and that is the red flag law. I guess I'll just quote you. Any proposed red flag law coming from the federal government, the bill titled Anti-Red Flag Act, would preempt all current or future proposed red flag laws coming from Washington, D.C. and make them all null and void and of no effect in the state of Oklahoma. So
this is going to be a big issue, by the way, probably in 2020.
A really big issue. So the question is, what would you say to people that make the claim that the fears from pro-Second Amendment supporters about these red flag laws are exaggerated?
Well, if you look at the red flag laws that have already been implemented, there's over a dozen states that have already passed them. Now, not all of them have fully implemented them as far as they're actually using them, but they have passed them. Yeah. And so this is a growing movement of trying to do this. Even there's Republicans in the U.S. Senate and U.S. House that are trying to pass funding to get states to implement red flag laws. So there is a movement for this, and this is absolutely an infringement, not just on Second Amendment rights, but it's an infringement upon the First Amendment rights. So there's actual real-world examples of how this has been abused. There was a former military member, a veteran, who was eating out and was talking to someone that he was having lunch or dinner with and had talked about school shootings and said something needs to be done about these school shootings. This isn't right that this is happening to our children. The waitress didn't hear that part. She just heard talks about school shootings and something needs to be done. Wow. And she took that to mean that he was going to commit a school shooting. And so she called it in and they used the red flag law to come to his house. And that's one example, but there actually was another example over on the East Coast. I believe it was Delaware, where law enforcement went to someone's home early in the morning around 5 a.m. the day before this gentleman had gotten in an argument with one of his family members. So his family member called it in and said he was a threat. Law enforcement showed up, looked through the window, and there was a firearm on the table. And they came, knocked on the door. The guy answered the door. They said, we're here to confiscate your firearms. He said, no, you're not. He turned around, was walking towards the firearm, and shots were fired, and he was killed. Wow. He lost his life without ever having committed a crime because somebody reported it. And then with some of these instances, they actually can report it anonymously.
Wow.
So these red flag laws not only violate the Second Amendment, they violate almost every aspect of the Bill of Rights, from your First Amendment right to free speech, because you have the right to speak freely.
Well, where's the due process?
It violates due process. It violates private property rights. It violates the right to face your accuser, criminal prosecutions, jury trials. I mean, it violates almost every aspect of the Bill of Rights, other than maybe, having troops stationed in your home.
Wow.
Other than that, though, it violates. If you look through and read the Bill of Rights, you can make a case that these violate every aspect of it.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm trying to do the Anti-Red Flag Act, which would prohibit the state or any city or county in Oklahoma from accepting federal funds to implement a red flag law.
Wow.
Prohibit the state from doing it ourselves, or if the feds do it, prohibit that to be enforced in our state.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
The next question is Senate Bill 1459, and which prohibits any municipality in Oklahoma to adopt a sanctuary policy. Under the bill, any city or town that enacts such a policy would be eligible for state funding through agencies and grants. So my question is more of a devil's advocate question. And what would you say to people that would ask, how is this the smaller government approach? Why not let municipalities decide for themselves?
Well, and when we do talk about small government, limited government, I absolutely am in favor of that. But we also need to talk about the proper functions of government. And so when we read through the Constitution, the federal government is very limited in what they have the authority to be involved with. We've granted them certain powers in Article 1, Section 8. One of those powers that we've granted them is the military, right? They can raise an army and a navy and be responsible for that. So you could say, well, if you want limited government, smaller government, why don't we just let every city have their own army or navy or whatever? Well, that won't work. There's certain things that have to be uniform. Another example is the Constitution says that they have to have uniform weights and measures, uniform system of bankruptcies, right? So there's certain things that have to be uniform in our federal system, in this union that we have. One of those things is immigration. The federal government is tasked with and has the authority, the power to be involved with immigration. So we have the Constitution, then we have federal laws in conformity with the Constitution, which immigration laws would qualify for that because they have that power. And so if you have a city or a county down here trying to usurp state law, federal law that are all in conformity with the U.S. Constitution, those local municipalities don't have that authority. And so it depends, because like the same thing we just talked about with the red flag laws, okay? The U.S. Constitution is clear in the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If the feds or the state pass a red flag law that violates that, well, we do have the authority to say, no, we're going to reject that because it's not in conformity with the Constitution. We can't reject something that's in conformity with the Constitution, like immigration laws, but we can on something that violates the Second Amendment. So it's not just about, is it limited government, is it small government, is it constitutional government? And so those that would violate the immigration laws are violating the Constitution.
That's a good answer. And the second part of that question is, when you look at what's going on in Virginia, municipalities declaring themselves sanctuary cities, would these laws hinder that same type of action from happening in Oklahoma if it needed to?
So this bill only deals specifically with illegal immigration. Right? So it only talks to that type of sanctuary city policy. It doesn't talk about Second Amendment sanctuary policies like are taking place in Virginia. Like I just said, actually we have a responsibility if the state or the federal government are trying to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. Our cities, our counties, anyone in elected office has a responsibility to defend the Constitution first and foremost. So this only deals with those foreigners that would break our laws and enter the country illegally. It doesn't deal with sanctuaries for Second Amendment or free speech or any of those other constitutionally protected rights.
I think a lot of times people get caught up and they think that the process is the principle and not the principle being being what you create a process after. So when they look at something like a red flag law or they look at sanctuary cities and stuff like that when it pertains to the Second Amendment, or they look at it when it pertains to illegal immigration, they try to say the process is the principle. So if they're doing it in Virginia for Second Amendment things, that means it must be principle to do it the same way for immigration. No, actually, the process is not how you get there. How you get to the principal position is how you use that tool. So that's just the tool. The sanctuary thing is the tool. So if you're using it in a tyrannical way, that's still tyrannical. And you can use that same tool to promote liberty. And I think that's the difference between Virginia and what's going on with these immigration policies at the state level.
I agree. Yep. So, government is a tool to be used for good or for evil, and it should be used to protect rights. Yep.
And this is one of the next question is like, it really touched me because being a veteran, it just, I'll just go into it. Okay. The next question is about, well, actually I didn't get the bill for this. So it's actually if you file legislation to ensure men and women serving in Oklahoma National Guard are only deployed as directed by the United States Constitution. So anyway, so going into that, one of the questions that I had with things like the Patriot Act and AUMF, that's the authorization for use of military force. These things give almost unlimited power to the federal government in a military capacity. do the states still have control over the National Guard, or would you say that's largely ceremonial? So basically, yeah.
Unfortunately, I would say it is largely ceremonial at this point in time. I think the bill number is either Senate Bill 1089 or 1091.
Okay.
I have a lot of bills, so I don't remember all my bill
I
numbers.
hear you, and we will make sure that we will embed those.
Put that up on there. Yes. So unfortunately, it is largely ceremonial. If you read through the Constitution, and I mentioned that the federal Congress does have the authority to create a Navy, to create an Army. There's certain aspects that they do have, but if you read the Constitution, when it talks about the militia, the organized militia, when it talks about, which is now our National Guard, when it talks about these different things, it reserved to the states the appointment of officers because they didn't want even military members to have their loyalty solely to the national Congress. They wanted them to be local people, to have that local control, to have that local respect for their individual states, that being unions of this United States, and so they wanted that to make sure that there was still that check and balance even within that. And we still do have that ceremonial to a degree in some regards, but the federal government has operated so far out of the constitutional authority, requiring declarations of
when you're
war.
looking at AUMF alone, I mean, it's just insane how we're operating on that same one, and it lets them go to all these different countries
16
anytime
years,
they want.
18 years, however long it's been. And
it's insane.
And so this is trying to restore that balance and bring it back to the state and say, no, we as the state have a responsibility to our men and women in uniform in our guard, and make sure that they're only being used in a constitutional manner, not just at the whims of whether it's a president or Congress or anyone. It needs to again follow that constitutional principle, not just have that structure like you said that can be used by anyone. It has to be within the conformity of those principles.
I love that a lot of this, though, too, has to do with, giving states their sovereignty back. I think that that's something that we're headed towards. I really, really do. I really believe that as we go into the next 10 years, that it's going to be something. I mean, we have followers, especially on the East Coast, that have talked to us about this because there's a lot of things like red flag laws and these things that are happening, particularly on the East Coast. And so if you guys are following and you're watching, please make sure that you get in the comments and you let us know what your thoughts are on this, because it's important to understand many people do not know how government works at the state level. They hear about it on the federal level, but do not understand how it works on the state level or the city level. So I think it's important.
I get contacted by people often asking how I'm going to vote on impeachment, and have to clarify to them, well, that's U.S. senators. I'm at the state level not in Washington, D.C., at Oklahoma City State Capitol.
That's almost as bad. That's almost as bad as I know you've been on. You're very active on Twitter, so you do remember when they actually did the impeachment and it passed the House. You were looking on Twitter and you saw all these blue check marks talking about, he's gone now. He's gone. He's probably packing his bags now. And you're just
Yikes.
Like, oh my gosh, please, do you even civics? I don't understand.
Unfortunately, that's something that's lacking, but I'm working on that too, trying to get more civics back involved in education.
Insane.
Yep.
Wow.
We'll move on to the last question.
Oh, yes. And this is interesting. This is interesting. So, again, we're going to make sure, you guys, session hasn't even started yet, so give us a break, okay? We're going to get all bill numbers in. We're going to be rotating all these videos, so you're going to have all the information that you need. So this is legislation, if I can talk, legislation filed that has to do with declaring 2020 the year of the Bible. I thought that was really interesting. So what made this year, 2020, the year of the Bible?
So when I first came across this, actually, I was just researching. I love to read, and was looking at different stuff from President Reagan. And I came across this very interesting thing that in 1982, Congress passed this resolution to allow the President, Reagan, to declare 1983 the year of the Bible.
Oh, my God.
Which I found to be very interesting.
I
don't think anybody knows that.
And so I was like, wow, that is very intriguing. I wonder if this has been done since then in any other way. Started doing some research. Former Kentucky Governor Bevin had done a couple executive orders. He did it 2 years in a row as an executive order. But I didn't really find a whole lot about this. Wow. So I thought, how great would that be? 2020, a year of vision, not pun, but a lot of people are talking about that.
Absolutely.
Having a new governor in the state of Oklahoma.
Yes.
Just looking to the direction our country could go.
Yeah.
And so I filed this resolution mirrored on what Congress had passed with President Reagan. Obviously made a few changes by, instead of it just saying our nation, also saying our state.
Yes.
instead of referencing the president, referencing governor, and some things like that. So it's almost exactly identical to what was passed previously. And the purpose for it is to get people to refocus, to look back to some of these foundational principles. Now, I've been called, Christian Taliban, and wanting to establish a Christian kingdom, and take over government and
all
make this the official the official religion and all these things. It's not doing any of those. It's perfectly within conformity of the First Amendment.
Yes,
because we're not establishing any religion.
Exactly.
We're not respecting any denomination.
Exactly.
We're not even forcing this on anybody.
Exactly.
It's entirely optional, but it is recognizing the historical aspect of what the Bible had in our founding. If you read the Declaration, if you read the Constitution, it's based on so many of the biblical principles. Yeah. If you read through not just what the founding fathers wrote, but American presidents throughout history have used the Bible and quoted the Bible and referenced the Bible. I mean, our country was founded upon people that were fleeing religious persecution so that they could read the Bible and worship as they chose.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is the foundation of our nation and of our state in so many different ways. So this is paying respect to that. It is encouraging people to get back into the scriptures, to read those scriptures. So I filed this, and then come to find out I was contacted by a group that's actually been pushing this also. They want to do this at the national level. And what they're saying, and I agree with it, is they say for each individual to make this the year of the Bible in your life. Whether that's find one scripture specifically that you will focus on and use that to really get that, in your heart and change your mentality and everything, or plan on reading the whole Bible in a year if you've never done that before, or whatever the case might be, to make this the year of the Bible in your life. And so that's the purpose for this, is to pass this resolution, hoping that Governor Stitt and it allows for local cities and city councils and county commissioners to adopt similar resolutions, hoping that they'll do that and that we can focus on truth. Because one thing that I'm seeing so much of, especially with the younger generation, is they talk about, well, you have to speak your truth. What is your truth? So whatever their feelings are, they believe that's truth. Yeah. And the way we should look at things is that there are higher truths. God's word, as Christians, as believers, that should be the ultimate authority, the highest truth in our lives. As Americans, the Constitution is the highest authority in the governmental sphere. But we should be looking to truths, not just to how we feel. And so this is an opportunity to look to this truth of God's word and see how that can impact and change people's lives.
Absolutely. I love that. And I hope that this kind of gives perspective to those who may be a little bit confused about what that is. And I think that gives total perspective on what that's about. I mean, it gives me perspective on what this is about. And I think that in the direction that, our nation is headed, it's going to affect, individual states. But I like this because it does kind of bring us full circle. And we are in need of great change in this nation. And I believe that one of the best places that we can go, you guys, is obviously going back to the Word of God. And like you said, you guys have heard me say it a million times, there is no such thing as your truth. It's non-existent. There is an established truth, and that is it.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, our generation is drowning in what I call an identity crisis. And so when you have a lot of different truths that are being, all around, then you end up with a very confused generation. So I love this, and I hope that Oklahoma's youth is able to grab a hold of this as well. I think that these are awesome. And again, we're going to be rotating this video again. We may be able to get commentary from you again later on in session, depending on how it's going. Yeah. But we want to be able to bring focus to the bills, especially when those bills are like everybody's buzzing about it and it's very busy. You guys, you already know, one of the biggest things that you can do as a constituent is get educated, get information from the horse's mouth, and just put away all of the extra. That's one of the biggest issues that we talk to people in Oklahoma
that's
are
what
about.
This whole thing is about.
People they stay in confusion instead of actually getting the facts and knowing how they want to proceed. But also, contact Senator Dahm. Contact him. Contact his office. Meet with him. Get the facts instead of just hearing all of the, Christian Taliban and, all that other, all that other
all the noise,
stuff.
Yes,
all of the noise, absolutely.
And contact your state senator, your state representative too. Especially if you support these bills, ask them to sign on as a co-author because they can put their name on it as well, and that generates more support, the more of those that we have. So yeah, I'm happy for people to reach out to me, whether they live in my district or not. But I encourage them to reach their elected officials as well.
Absolutely. Well, we really appreciate you giving us, your time and just coming to talk about all that you're doing. I am excited to see where these are going to go this year. So
me too.
Again, you guys, Senator Nathan Dahm with District 33 with us today. Thank you so much for joining, guys. Till next time. Take care.
Bye.